I'm Alina, 41 female. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in a house that feels two sizes too big for just me. As a senior project manager for a large tech firm, my life revolves around Gantt charts, deadlines, and meticulous planning, which is a cruel irony considering how my personal life completely imploded without any warning. My ex-husband, Mark, lives just 10 minutes away with our two children, Maya and Leo, and for the last 6 months, he has been methodically poisoning them against me. This isn't just a story about a bitter divorce. It's about how I uncovered a disgusting, calculated campaign of lies and used my manipulator's own tactics to save my relationship with my children and expose him for the monster he truly is. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Our marriage wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was a slow build, a partnership founded on what I thought were shared values and mutual respect. Mark and I met in our late 20s. He was a charismatic sales director, the kind of man who could command a boardroom with a confident smile and a firm handshake. I was drawn to his ambition and the way he seemed to build a world around us, a safe and prosperous bubble for our future family. We bought the house with the big backyard, had two beautiful children, Maya and Leo, and settled into a comfortable rhythm. From the outside, we were the picture of suburban success, the happy, stable family with the well-tended garden and the two cars in the driveway. I managed complex projects at work, and he closed big deals. We were a team, or so I believed. The cracks, when they began to show, were so fine that I dismissed them as normal wear and tear on a long-term relationship. Mark started traveling more for work, his trips becoming longer and more frequent. When he was home, he seemed distant, his attention glued to his phone. He'd laugh it off, saying the pressure at his new role was immense, and I, wanting to be the supportive wife, would plan quiet family weekends to help him de-stress. I'd notice little things. A new, expensive watch he claimed was a corporate gift, a sudden interest in a genre of music he'd always hated, a defensiveness when I asked about his day. I chalked it up to a midlife crisis, something we could work through. I suggested therapy, and he scoffed, telling me I was being overly dramatic. "Everything is fine, Alina," he'd say, patting my arm with a dismissive air. "You just need to relax." He was an expert at making me feel like my concerns were irrational, a skill I would later understand was a cornerstone of his personality. The end came swiftly and without the dramatic confrontation you see in movies. There was no screaming match, no clothes thrown on the lawn. One Tuesday evening, after I'd put the kids to bed, I found him in the living room with a suitcase by the door. He told me, in the calm, measured tone he used for business negotiations, that he was unhappy. He said he hadn't been for years. He felt we'd grown apart, that we wanted different things, and that he had rented an apartment across town. It was a done deal, a project he had managed behind my back. I was stunned, speechless. There was no we in his decision, only he had planned his exit as meticulously as I would plan a product launch, complete with logistics and a clear end date. When I finally found my voice and asked if there was someone else, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "No, Alina, this has nothing to do with anyone else. This is about me needing to find my own happiness again." It was a lie, of course. I would later find out about his long-term affair with a junior colleague, but at that moment, his performance was flawless. He made our divorce feel like a sad but necessary corporate restructuring. He was so convincing that a part of me almost felt guilty for not seeing his unhappiness sooner. He assured me we would handle everything amicably for the sake of the children. We'd be a model for co-parenting, he promised. We would split everything 50-50, custody included. He was so reasonable, so logical that I agreed. I thought we were closing a chapter with dignity. I had no idea he was already laying the groundwork for a war. In the weeks that followed, he was the perfect co-parent. He'd pick the kids up on time, text me pictures of them at the park, and call them every night before bed when they were with me. He was Mark, the super dad, a man who, despite our marital failure, was committed to his children. My own friends commented on how well he was handling things, how mature he was being. "You're lucky, Alina," my friend Sarah told me over coffee. My ex turned into a complete monster. Mark is a saint. I nodded, a small part of me feeling a flicker of gratitude, but beneath the surface, something felt wrong. The kids started coming home from his weekends quieter, more withdrawn. Maya, my bubbly 13-year-old, would retreat to her room and refuse to talk about her time with her dad. Leo, my sweet and sensitive 10-year-old, started having nightmares. When I'd ask them what was wrong, they'd just shake their heads and say, "Nothing." Mark's story was that the divorce was hitting them harder than he thought. He'd call me, his voice laced with faux concern, and say, "We just need to give them time, Alina. They're confused." He was painting himself as the stable parent, the one who was in tune with their emotional needs, while I was, by implication, the one they were struggling to be around. The perfect facade he had built was not just for the outside world. It was a carefully constructed stage, and he was positioning me as the villain in a play I didn't even know I was in. The truth was far more sinister than a simple affair or a man seeking happiness. The perfect husband and father I thought I knew was an illusion. The real Mark was a master manipulator, and he had just begun his campaign to erase me from our children's lives. I was living in the wreckage of my marriage, thinking we were rebuilding with civility, while he was quietly planting bombs in the foundation. The shift was subtle at first, almost unnoticeable. It started with small comments from the kids after they'd spent a weekend at Mark's new, stylish apartment. "Dad bought a new gaming console. He said we could have one too, but you probably think it's too expensive," Maya would say, with a slight edge to her voice. Or Leo would mention, "Dad lets us have pizza for breakfast. He says moms have too many rules." I'd try to explain calmly that we had a budget or that pizza wasn't a healthy breakfast, but my words felt defensive. I was the parent of no, the enforcer of rules, while Mark was becoming the parent of yes, the fun-loving dad who understood them. Mark was playing the classic Disneyland dad card, but it was laced with something more toxic. He wasn't just spoiling them, he was framing my responsible parenting as restrictive and uncaring. The whispers grew louder and more specific. One afternoon, Maya came home and announced she didn't want to continue her piano lessons. She'd loved piano for years. When I asked why, she crossed her arms and mumbled, "Dad says you're only making me do it because you always wanted to be a musician. He says you're trying to live your life through me." I was floored. I'd enrolled her in piano because she had begged me to after seeing a concert. Mark had been the one who complained about the cost and the noise. Now he had twisted it, reframing my support as selfish ambition. I tried to reason with her, to remind her of how much she enjoyed playing, but it was like talking to a brick wall, a wall Mark had built. The narrative he was weaving was insidious. I was the source of all their frustrations, and he was their confidant, the one who truly understood them. The emotional distance between me and my children began to stretch into a chasm. Phone calls from their dad's house became shorter. My "I love yous" were met with mumbled "you twos" or silence. When I'd try to hug Leo, he would stiffen, his small body rigid in my arms. The warmth that had defined our relationship was being replaced by a confusing chill. He started questioning everything. "Why do we have to eat vegetables every night? Dad says it's not a big deal. Why can't I stay up late? Dad says you're too strict." Each question felt like a small jab, a coordinated attack on my authority and my love. Mark, meanwhile, maintained his pretense of concerned co-parenting with me. He'd call me to discuss the kids' behavioral issues. "Maya seems so angry lately," he'd say, his voice dripping with false empathy. "She told me she feels like she can't talk to you. I'm worried she's bottling things up." He was reporting the symptoms of the very disease he was spreading. He was setting fires and then calling the fire department, pretending to be a hero. He made me doubt my own parenting, my own sanity. Was I too strict? Was I not listening? I bent over backward to reconnect. I planned movie nights with their favorite snacks, suggested we go to the amusement park, offered to take Maya shopping. But my efforts were often met with apathy or outright rejection. Maya would claim she had too much homework, and Leo would say he'd rather just play on his tablet. The tablet, that was Mark's ultimate weapon. He had bought them both top-of-the-line tablets to help with schoolwork, he'd claimed. But they became portals through which his influence flowed constantly. He was in constant contact with them, texting them, calling them, playing online games with them, even when they were under my roof. My home no longer felt like my own. It felt like an outpost of his, a territory he could infiltrate at will. The breaking point came during a parent-teacher confer. NCE for Leo. His teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Davison, looked at me with concern. "Leo's grades have been slipping," she said gently, "and he seems very distracted. The other day in class, he mentioned that things were unstable at home with you." I felt the blood drain from my face. Unstable? I had kept their lives as stable as humanly possible. Same house, same school, same routine. The only instability was the divorce. "He told another student that you cry a lot and that you're always angry because his dad left," she continued, clearly uncomfortable. I felt a wave of nausea. I had cried, yes. I had cried myself to sleep in the lonely silence of my empty bedroom, but I had never, ever done it in front of my children. I was meticulous about protecting them from my grief. The word angry was a complete fabrication. Mark was scripting my emotions for them, feeding them a version of me that was weak, hysterical, and emotionally volatile. He was turning my private pain into a public spectacle for them to judge. After the conference, I tried to talk to Leo. I knelt in front of him in his bedroom and asked him gently about what he'd said at school. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. He just stared at his tablet, his thumbs moving furiously across the screen. "Please, Leo, talk to me," I pleaded. "Dad said I don't have to talk to you if I don't want to," he mumbled, not looking up. "He said you just want to make everything about you." That was it. That was Mark's voice, his exact phrasing. The whispers had become a roar and they were drowning me out. I was no longer their mother. I was a caricature, a villain drawn by their father's hand. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the dark kitchen and finally let the sobs I'd been suppressing rack my body. I wasn't just losing my marriage, I was losing my children. And I had no idea how to fight a ghost. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. My home, once filled with the chaotic, beautiful noise of family, was now eerily silent. Maya communicated in monosyllables, her headphones a permanent fixture, creating a barrier I couldn't penetrate. Leo was even worse. He actively avoided me. If I entered a room, he would leave. He stopped asking me to tuck him in at night. He'd just go to his room and close the door, leaving me standing in the hallway with a hollow ache in my chest. I felt like a ghost in my own home, haunting the lives of children who no longer saw me as their mother. I was her, the woman their father had told them about. The angry, unstable, selfish woman. Mark's campaign was brutally effective. He had successfully isolated me. When I tried to bring up my concerns with friends, they'd offer sympathetic but unhelpful advice. "They're just kids, Alina. They're acting out because of the divorce. It will pass." My own mother suggested I give them space. No one understood that this wasn't typical post-divorce behavior. This was a calculated psychological operation, and I was the target. My best friend, Chloe, was the only one who seemed to grasp the severity of the situation. As a family law attorney, she had seen this kind of parental alienation before. "He's poisoning the well, Alina," she told me over a tense coffee meeting. "This is a classic narcissist move. He can't control you anymore, so he's controlling the narrative and using the kids as weapons. You need to document everything. Every strange comment, every canceled plan, every time they parrot one of his phrases." I started a journal, a grim catalog of my children's growing disdain. It was a heartbreaking read, a timeline of my own erasure. But it felt passive. I was documenting my demise, not fighting it. The custody evaluation was looming. Mark had been the one to push for it, claiming he was deeply concerned about the children's emotional well-being under my care. He told the mediator he was worried I was depressed and overwhelmed, and that the kids needed the stability he could provide. It was a masterful performance. He was building a case against me using bricks of his own making. I was terrified. How could I defend myself against lies whispered in my children's ears? How could I prove that their sudden coldness wasn't a reflection of my parenting, but of his manipulation? I was losing, and the final verdict felt inevitable. The turning point came on a Sunday evening, one of those quiet, dreadful nights that marked the end of my weekend with the kids. Mark was due to pick them up at 7 p.m. I had made their favorite dinner, spaghetti carbonara, but Maya claimed she wasn't hungry and Leo just pushed his food around his plate. The silence at the dinner table was heavier than any argument could ever be. When Mark's car pulled into the driveway, Leo jumped up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. He ran to the door, backpack in hand, eager to leave. Maya followed, not even making eye contact as she walked past me. Mark stood at the door, giving me that familiar pie. Tying smile. "Rough weekend?" he asked, the feigned sympathy a knife in my gut. "They just need their routine. Don't worry, they'll be fine with me." He herded them out the door and into his car. I watched them drive away, the familiar emptiness washing over me. I closed the door and leaned against it, fighting back tears. As I walked through the quiet house, doing a routine tidying up, I went into Leo's room to collect his laundry. That's when I saw it. Lying on the floor, half hidden under his bed, was his tablet. He had been so frantic to leave that he'd forgotten his most prized possession. Normally, I would have texted Mark immediately, telling him to come back and get it. It would have been the responsible co-parent thing to do. But something stopped me. A flicker of an idea, a dangerous thought. For months, that tablet had been a weapon used against me, a direct line for Mark's poison. Now, it was in my hands. I hesitated, my conscience warring with a desperate need for answers. Accessing my son's private device felt like a violation. But hadn't my relationship with my son already been violated in the most profound way? I picked it up. The screen was locked, but Leo, being a 10-year-old boy, used a simple pattern that I'd seen him draw 100 times. My fingers trembled as I swiped it open. The home screen was filled with games, a chaotic jumble of colorful icons. I didn't know what I was looking for. Texts, emails. I felt a wave of guilt and almost put it down. This was wrong. But then I remembered Mrs. Davison's concerned face, the stiffness in Leo's shoulders when I tried to hug him, the deadness in Maya's eyes. My desperation outweighed my guilt. I started opening apps, my heart pounding. I checked his messages. There were dozens from Mark, full of fun emojis and "I love you, buddy" affirmations, but also subtle digs at me. "Is Mom making you eat broccoli again? Don't worry, we'll have burgers when you get here." It was sickening, but it wasn't the smoking gun I needed. Then I saw the voice memo app. It was an app Leo rarely used. I opened it. There was a list of recordings, most of them just a few seconds long, silly noises and him humming. But one file, dated just 2 days ago, stood out. It was titled simply "Practice." My blood ran cold. With a shaking finger, I pressed play. The recording began. It was Leo's voice, small and hesitant. "My mom, she sat a lot. She cries in her room." Then I heard him, Mark. His voice was calm, patient, like a director coaching an actor. "Good, Leo, that's good. Now try to sound a little more worried when you say it. Like this: My mom cries in her room and it really scares me." There was a pause. Then Leo's voice again, mimicking his father's inflection perfectly. It really scares me." The recording went on. It was a full script. Mark was feeding Leo lines, coaching him on what to say, what emotions to fake for the custody evaluator. He told him to mention my anger, to say I was too tired to play with him, to say I seemed lonely and overwhelmed since the divorce. Each line was a carefully crafted lie designed to paint me as an unstable parent. "Remember, buddy," Mark's voice said at the end, the warmth in his tone making it all the more chilling. "You're not lying. You're just helping the evaluator understand how to make things better for you. You're being a brave helper. This is our secret, okay? It's to help our family." I sank to the floor, the tablet clutched in my hand. I wasn't sobbing. I was beyond tears. The sound of my ex-husband methodically teaching our son how to betray me was the most horrific thing I had ever heard. It wasn't just manipulation, it was abuse. He was corrupting our child, turning him into a pawn in his sick game. In that moment, the grief and despair that had crippled me for months were burned away by a sudden, white-hot rage. He thought he was untouchable. He thought he had broken me. He was wrong. He had just handed me the weapon I needed to destroy him. This forgotten toy was no longer a child's plaything. It was evidence, and I was going to use it. For a long moment, I just sat on Leo's bedroom floor, the cold tile a stark contrast to the fire burning in my gut. The recording played on a loop in my head, Mark's smooth, reassuring voice coaching our son to lie, to perform. "You're being a brave helper." The words were so twisted, so profoundly evil, that they almost didn't seem real. He wasn't just creating a false narrative. He was actively teaching our son that deception was a tool for helping the family. He was damaging Leo in a way I couldn't even begin to comprehend. My first instinct was pure, unadulterated fury. I wanted to call Mark and scream, to play the recording over the phone and hear the panic in his voice. I wanted to drive to his apartment and confront him in person, but I forced myself to stop, to breathe. My role as a project manager kicked in, overriding the emotional storm. A project had just landed on my desk, the most important one of my life, the complete and total dismantling of Mark's credibility. And like any project, it required a plan, not a reaction. Blowing up at him now would only give him a chance to get ahead of it, to delete evidence, to twist the story further. He would claim I doctored the recording or that I was taking it out of context. He would paint me as the unstable, hysterical ex-wife he had already described to everyone. No, this had to be handled with cold, calculated precision. My rage needed to be channeled into strategy. The first thing I did was secure the evidence. I connected the tablet to my laptop and with trembling hands, emailed the audio file to myself, to Chloe, and saved it to a secure cloud drive. I then made a backup of the backup. I felt like a spy in my own home, but the paranoia was necessary. I knew Mark would soon realize the tablet was missing and the clock was ticking. I immediately called Chloe. It was late on a Sunday night, but I knew she'd answer. I played the recording for her over the phone without any preamble. When it finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was stripped of its usual friendly warmth, replaced by the steely tone of an attorney. "Oh, he is done," she said softly. "Elena, this is it. This is parental alienation in its purest, most vile form. A judge will be horrified. This isn't just a smoking gun, it's a nuke." Her validation was the first real breath I had taken in months. I wasn't crazy, it was real. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Nothing yet," she commanded. "Do not let him know you have it. When he calls about the tablet, you play dumb, you haven't seen it. Let him sweat. In the meantime, we need to see what else is on there. He got arrogant, Elena. He got sloppy. If he did this, I guarantee there's more." Chloe was right. The recording was damning, but it was a snapshot in time. I needed to understand the full scope of his campaign. For the next few hours, I went through every part of that tablet. It felt like an archaeological dig into the ruins of my family. I found the text threads between Mark and Maya. They were even more insidious than the ones with Leo. Mark was positioning himself as Maya's best friend, her only true ally against her rigid, out-of-touch mother. He validated her every teenage complaint, fueling her resentment towards me. "Maya, Mom is making me do my history homework. It's so boring." "Mark, I know, sweetie. She doesn't get that you need a break. We'll have a fun day when you get here, I promise. No boring rules." He sent her articles about controlling parents and memes that mocked mothers who enforced screen time limits. He was systematically undermining my authority, painting me as an obstacle to her happiness. Then I found his email account, which he had foolishly left logged in. It was a goldmine. I found receipts for gifts I never knew about, expensive sneakers, video games, concert tickets, all delivered to his apartment, all used to buy their affection. More damning, however, were the email exchanges with his girlfriend, the junior colleague he swore didn't exist. In them, he openly bragged about his strategy. In one email, he wrote, "Elena is making it so easy for me. She's so wrapped up in her work and her feelings that she can't see what's happening. The kids are completely on my side now. The evaluator won't have a choice but to recommend I get primary custody. Then we can finally move in together without all the drama." In another, he complained about having to put on the concerned dad act for the mediator. He mocked my grief, my attempts to connect with the kids, my adherence to the routines that were the only stable thing in their lives. He had laid out his entire manipulative playbook in writing. He wasn't just an unfaithful husband, he was a sociopath. He felt no remorse, only a smug satisfaction in his own cleverness. I took screenshots of everything. Every text, every email, every receipt. I organized them into folders, labeled with dates and context. My project manager brain was in overdrive, creating a mountain of evidence that was meticulously organized and irrefutable. As the sun began to rise, I sat back, exhausted but with a new sense of clarity. I finally understood the full picture. This wasn't just about winning the custody battle anymore. It was about saving my children from a father who saw them not as human beings to be loved, but as assets to be won, tools to be used in his pathetic, vengeful game. The phone rang at 7:30 a.m., just as I knew it would. It was Mark. "Hey," he said, his voice a little too casual. "Weird question, but did Leo leave his tablet at your place? He's tearing his room apart looking for it." I took a deep breath, channeling my inner actress. "Oh no, I haven't seen it," I said, my voice light and unconcerned. "I did a quick cleanup after you guys FT, but I didn't see it anywhere. Are you sure he didn't leave it in the car?" I heard him sigh in frustration on the other end. "Probably. Okay, well, if it turns up, let me know. He's freaking out." "Of course," I said sweetly. "Talk to you later." I hung up the phone, a cold, triumphant smile on my face. Let him sweat. Let him worry about his lost little tool of manipulation. The web of lies he had so carefully woven was about to be unraveled, thread by sickening thread. And I was the one holding the scissors. The week leading up to the custody evaluation was the longest of my life. I had to maintain a perfect poker face, pretending to be the same downtrodden, worried mother while secretly holding a hand full of aces. Every interaction with Mark was a masterclass in self-control. He called twice more about the tablet, his voice growing more strained each time. I stuck to my story. I hadn't seen it. Maybe it fell out at school. Maybe one of his friends borrowed it. I could hear the rising panic in his tone, but he couldn't push too hard without revealing why the device was so important. It was a delicious, private irony. The very tool he used to make my life a living hell was now causing him sleepless nights. Meanwhile, Chloe and I were preparing for war. We decided against a dramatic, premature reveal. A surprise attack would be far more effective. "We don't want to give him time to spin this," Chloe advised, her lawyer brain working at full speed. We presented all at once in front of the evaluator. We let him walk into the trap himself. Our strategy was simple but brutal. The evaluator, a court-appointed psychologist named Dr. Albright, was scheduled to have individual sessions with me, Mark, and then joint sessions with the children. Mark had been so confident, so sure he had coached his little star witness perfectly. He had no idea the script had been leaked. The plan was to let Mark have his meeting first. Let him sit there and perform, weaving his tale of my instability and his heroic fatherhood. Let him paint the picture he had so carefully constructed. Then, it would be my turn. Chloe would be present for my session, as was my right, and we would bring the evidence. Not just the recording, but the entire, meticulously organized dossier of texts, emails, and receipts. We would let the facts speak for themselves. The night before my meeting with Dr. Albright, I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear and anxiety that had been my constant companions were gone, replaced by a steely resolve. I was no longer a victim in his drama. I was the director of its final act. I went into the kids' rooms while they were sleeping at Mark's. Maya's room was a fortress of teenage angst, posters of bands I didn't recognize plastered on the walls. Leo's room was still filled with the Legos and superhero figures of a boy who was being forced to grow up too fast. I stood in the quiet darkness and felt a pang of sorrow not for myself, but for them. They were the true victims here. Whatever the outcome, they would be hurt. My job was to minimize that damage and ensure they ended up in a home where they would be loved unconditionally, not used as pawns. The day of the evaluation arrived. Chloe and I sat in the waiting room of Dr. Albright's office. Mark was already inside. I could hear the faint murmur of his voice through the closed door, and I pictured him in there, delivering his Oscar-worthy performance, his face a mask of concern. He was probably talking about my erratic behavior, my depression, how the kids were scared of me. Let him talk. Let him dig his own grave. When he finally emerged, he gave me a smug, pitying look. "Good luck in there," he said, as if he were granting me a favor. "Just be honest." The hypocrisy was so staggering it was almost comical. "I will be, Mark," I replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Completely honest." A flicker of something, uncertainty, fear, crossed his face for a split second before the mask of confidence slid back into place. Then, it was our turn. Dr. Albright was a woman in her 50s with a calm, professional demeanor that immediately put me at ease. She started with gentle, open-ended questions about the marriage, the divorce, and my relationship with the children. I answered them truthfully, describing the loving relationship I'd had with them before everything changed. I described the confusion, the hurt, the feeling of being shut out. I explained how their behavior had shifted dramatically after the separation. I could see she was listening, but I could also see the professional skepticism in her eyes. So far, this was a classic, she said scenario. After about 20 minutes, Chloe cleared her throat. Dr. Albright, she said, her voice calm and firm. Elena has been trying to understand the source of this sudden change in her children's behavior. Recently, she came across something that we believe provides significant context. We believe Mark has been engaging in a severe and systematic campaign of parental alienation. Dr. Albright's expression remained neutral, but she steepled her fingers. Those are very strong accusations. We have proof, Chloe said simply. She opened her briefcase and took out a sleek, new tablet. It wasn't Leo's original. We had bought an identical one. This is a copy of the children's tablet. We have compiled the relevant evidence on this device for your review. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was it. I slid the new tablet across the polished wooden table. It was our Trojan horse, a seemingly innocent device filled with soldiers ready for battle. Before we get into the documents, I said, my voice steadier than I expected, there is an audio file I think you need to hear. It's a recording my son accidentally made a little over a week ago. I navigated to the file labeled Practice and pressed play. Mark's smooth, coaching voice filled the silent office. Good, Leo. That's good. Now try to sound a little more worried when you say it. Like this. My mom cries in her room and it really scares me. Dr. Albright's professional neutrality shattered. Her eyes widened, and a look of genuine shock and disgust spread across her face. She leaned forward, listening intently as the recording continued, as Mark fed lie after lie to our 10-year-old son. She listened to him instruct Leo on how to fake fear, how to describe my anger, how to perform for her. When the recording ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Dr. Albright slowly sat back in her chair, looking from the tablet to me. The skepticism was gone, replaced by a dawning horror. I see, she said, her voice strained. Please, Chloe said, gently tapping the screen. There's more. We have months of text messages, emails to his girlfriend detailing his plan, everything. It's all there. For the next hour, we walked Dr. Albright through the mountain of evidence. We showed her the texts where Mark undermined my authority, the emails where he bragged about manipulating the children, the receipts for the gifts used to buy their loyalty. We laid out the entire, sordid conspiracy. It was no longer a he said, she said situation. It was a he said, and he documented his own villainy situation. By the end, Dr. Albright looked shaken. She closed the tablet and pushed it back towards us. Thank you for sharing this with me, she said, her voice heavy. This is deeply disturbing. I will need to reconsider the structure of the remaining sessions. The Trojan tablet had breached the walls. The battle wasn't over, but we had just won a decisive victory. Dr. Albright was a consummate professional. After the initial shock, her demeanor shifted back to one of controlled, clinical focus, but with a new, sharp edge. She ended my session by stating that she needed to speak with Mark again, immediately and alone. She also requested that the children's sessions, scheduled for that afternoon, be postponed until the next day. She wanted to interview them in a different context now, armed with the truth. Chloe and I left her office and sat in the car in silence for a few minutes, the adrenaline slowly beginning to fade. What happens now? I finally asked. Now, Chloe said with a grim satisfaction, we let the system do its work. She's going to call him back in there and confront him. He's going to lie, he's going to deny, and he's going to unravel. She's trained to see right through it. Mark was called back in just 15 minutes after we left. I can only imagine the smug confidence he felt as he walked back into that office, assuming Dr. Albright needed to clarify a few points from his earlier, masterful performance. I would give anything to have been a fly on that wall. Later, through Chloe's legal channels and Dr. Albright's official report, I would get a clear picture of what transpired in that room. Dr. Albright didn't start by mentioning the tablet or the recording. She was more strategic than that. She began by asking him again about my emotional state. She used the exact phrases from the recording. Mark, Leo expressed that he's often scared because his mother cries so much. Can you tell me more about that? According to the report, Mark took the bait hook, line, and sinker. He launched into a deeply concerned monologue about my fragility, my supposed inability to cope. He embellished the lies he had taught Leo, adding his own dramatic flair. He described finding me, sobbing uncontrollably, and how he had to calm the children down. He was digging his grave with gusto, completely unaware that she was just handing him the shovel. After letting him spin his web for several minutes, Dr. Albright calmly interrupted him. "Mark, I have one more thing I'd like you to listen to." She played the recording. The report described his reaction in chillingly simple terms. Mr. Miller's face went pale. He initially attempted to deny the voice on the recording. NG was his. When Dr. Albright calmly stated that the audio was crystal clear, he switched tactics. He claimed the recording was taken out of context, that he was simply role-playing with Leo to help him express his real feelings. Dr. Albright, a seasoned psychologist who had seen every form of human deception, was not impressed. She noted in her report, Mr. Miller's explanations were inconsistent and demonstrably false. When presented with the audio evidence, his calm and confident demeanor dissolved, replaced by visible agitation and anger. She then confronted him with the emails to his girlfriend. The emails where he bragged about his plan, mocked me, and detailed his intention to get primary custody so he could move his girlfriend in. At that point, the report states, Mark became overtly hostile, accusing Dr. Albright of being biased and threatening to file a complaint. He had gone from compassionate father to cornered rat in under 10 minutes. His entire facade had crumbled under the weight of his own words. The next day's sessions with the children were handled with extreme care. Dr. Albright didn't confront them with the recording. Instead, she used specialized, gentle questioning techniques designed for children caught in loyalty conflicts. She asked Leo not about me, but about what it feels like to have to help a parent. She asked Maya about the pressure to take sides. Freed from the direct influence of their father and speaking to a neutral, kind adult, the children's true feelings began to emerge. Leo, in a moment of heartbreaking honesty, admitted that he was scared of making Dad mad if he didn't say the right things. Maya confessed that she missed me but felt guilty for it because her dad was so much fun and told her I was always sad. Dr. Albright's final report was a damning indictment of Mark's character and parenting. She concluded that he had engaged in a malicious and deeply harmful pattern of parental alienation, actively coaching the children to misrepresent the truth for his own personal gain. She described his actions as a severe form of psychological manipulation and stated that his continued influence posed a significant emotional risk to both Maya and Leo. She recommended that I be granted sole legal and primary physical custody immediately. She also recommended that Mark's visitation be supervised and that he be mandated to attend therapeutic counseling focused on narcissistic personality traits and coercive control before unsupervised visitation could even be considered. The court hearing was a formality. Mark's lawyer, having seen the report, knew they had no case. Mark didn't even show up. He sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, refusing to face the judge, the lawyers, or me. The judge read Dr. Albright's recommendations and stamped them into a court order without hesitation. I walked out of that courtroom legally victorious, but I felt no joy. I just felt an overwhelming sense of relief and a deep, profound sadness for my children. I had won the war, but the battlefield was my family, and the casualties were their innocence. When I went to pick them up from school that afternoon, armed with the new custody order, it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. They were confused and scared. Mark had already texted them, of course, spinning a new story about how I had tricked the judge and lied to turn everyone against him. The poison was deep in their veins, and I knew the antidote would not be quick or easy. That first night back in our home, the three of us together, was awkward and tense. They were withdrawn, conditioned to see me as the enemy. I didn't push. I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't even mention the court case. I just made them their favorite dinner, put on a movie we all used to love, and sat with them, creating a space of quiet, unconditional love. I was starting from scratch, rebuilding a relationship that had been systematically demolished. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a very long time, I knew it was possible. The evaluator's shock had been the earthquake that brought Mark's whole rotten structure down. Now, it was my job to clear the rubble and build something new and stronger in its place. The aftermath of a war is never clean. Even with the court order in hand and sole custody of my children, the battle was far from over. The first few months were a delicate, painful process of detoxification. Mark's poison had seeped deep into Maya and Leo's minds, and it couldn't be flushed out overnight. Maya was the toughest. As a teenager, she was already navigating a world of complex emotions, and her father's betrayal had hit her hard. She was angry at Mark for lying, angry at me for winning, and angry at herself for believing him. Our conversations were stilted, often ending with her retreating to her room and slamming the door. I knew I couldn't force her to talk, so I just made sure I was present. I left her favorite snacks on her desk. I told her I loved her every night, even if she didn't say it back, and I gave her space. The therapist Dr. Albright recommended was a godsend. She helped Maya unpack her conflicted feelings of love and anger toward her father, and the guilt she felt over her behavior toward me. Slowly, tentatively, the ice began to thaw. It started with small things. She'd leave her bedroom door open. She'd ask me a question about my day. Then one evening, about 3 months in, I found her sitting on the couch watching an old movie we used to enjoy together. "This is the part you always cry at," she said, a tiny smile playing on her lips. I sat down next to her and she didn't pull away. We watched the rest of the movie in comfortable silence, and when the credits rolled, she leaned her head on my shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it felt like the shifting of continents. Leo's healing took a different path. He was younger and more impressionable, and the guilt he carried for his role in the practice sessions was immense. He had nightmares for weeks and became quiet and withdrawn at school. I enrolled him in play therapy, a space where he could express his confusion and fear through art and games instead of words. His therapist helped him understand that he was not to blame, that he had been manipulated by an adult he trusted. I spent every evening I could just being with him, building Legos on his bedroom floor, reading his favorite books aloud, reminding him of the simple, uncomplicated love that had always existed between us. His recovery came in bursts. One day, out of the blue, he looked up from his drawing and said, "I'm sorry I said those things, Mommy." I pulled him into a hug, holding him tight. "Oh, sweetie, you have nothing to be sorry for. None of that was your fault. Not one bit." I felt his little body relax in my arms, a long-held tension finally releasing. Mark, as predicted, did not handle his defeat with grace. He refused to attend the court-mandated therapy. He missed his first few supervised visits, then stopped scheduling them altogether. He sent the kids manipulative texts, trying to spin his narrative of victimhood, but his power was gone. Without the constant reinforcement, his lies began to fade against the steady reality of a stable, loving home. Chloe handled the legal side, filing contempt charges for his refusal to attend therapy, which resulted in his visitation rights being suspended indefinitely until he complied. Financially, his refusal to cooperate made things easy. The court garnished his wages for child support, so I no longer had to deal with him directly. We were finally, truly free of his control. About a year after the court case, life had settled into a new, peaceful normal. Our house was once again filled with laughter. Maya had rediscovered her love for the piano, and the sound of her playing filled our home with music instead of silence. Leo was thriving at school, his confidence restored. Our relationship wasn't the same as it was before the divorce. We had all been scarred by the experience, but in many ways it was stronger. It was forged in fire, built on a foundation of resilience and hard-won truth. One Saturday, I was cleaning out a closet and came across Leo's old tablet. I had kept it locked away, a relic of a painful past. I held it in my hands, no longer seeing it as a weapon but as a catalyst. It was the forgotten toy that had saved us. I took it downstairs where Leo was watching cartoons. "Look what I found," I said gently. He looked at it, his expression unreadable for a moment, then he shrugged. "It's old. My new one is way faster." He turned back to his show, completely unfazed. It no longer held any power over him. It was just a thing. I walked outside to the backyard and placed the tablet in our metal fire pit. I didn't do it with anger or a need for dramatic revenge. I did it with a sense of quiet closure. I lit a match and watched as the plastic casing began to melt and warp, the screen cracking in the heat. I was burning the last remnant of Mark's influence, releasing the last ghost from our home. As I stood there, Maya came out and stood beside me. She didn't ask what I was doing. She just slipped her hand into mine. We watched the flames together until there was nothing left but smoke and ashes. The past was gone. Before us was a clear sky and a new beginning.